Hello everyone, this is part 21 of What If Naruto Was the God of Taijutsu, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. The roof of a once popular restaurant cracked open as Guy's body crashed through it. He fell into the establishment and his back hit a table, collapsing it beneath him. Damn, Hiro-sensei kicks as hard as I remember. Guy stumbled to his feet and took a look around. Wait a second. I remember this place. It brought back such early memories. This was the restaurant that Hinata had threatened to close down after they refused to let Naruto in. No way. He looked at the sign at the door that simply read, "Out of business." Her threat actually worked. He didn't have any more time to ponder this as a second hole formed in the roof as a man who looked identical to Guy landed in the restaurant. You're slowing down, Guy. Don't tell me your flames of youth are flickering in your old age. Hiro gave his student a warm smile despite the horrible situation the two of them were in. Guy laughed loudly as he placed his hands on his hips. Don't be ridiculous, Hiro-sensei. My power of youth is about to explode. You better be ready when it does, because you won't be able to match me anymore. The student shall have surpassed the master. He turned and pointed dramatically at his old sensei. Hiro's warm smile became even bigger and it seemed to light itself up. That's the spirit, young warrior. Let that youth break the sky as it pours forth. Guy returned the shining smile and their radiant beams seemed to glow even more brilliantly as they bounced off of one another. Let us continue. Guy settled into his favorite Goken stance. Yosh, show me what you got. Hiro mimicked the stance as they prepared to face off against one another. Oh, I shall show you. Guy, instead of running forward, spun around and kicked the table that was right next to him. It went flying across the room and Hiro easily shattered it with his fist. In the split second that the table blocked his view, Guy had closed the gap and threw his most powerful punch, catching his sensei in the chin and knocking him further back into the establishment. Hiro managed to stand on his feet and skid to a hard stop. Guy was immediately in front of him again, this time holding a chair that he swung forward. Hiro picked up the closest chair to himself and with one arm swung it. They s the chairs into the side of each other's faces, completely shattering the wood into pieces. If either man appeared the slightest bit bothered by the assault, they didn't show it. Instead, Hiro swung his other arm forward, grabbed Guy by the end and whipped him with all his might into the wall at the back. Guy shattered through it and rolled into the kitchen. He got back to his feet just in time to block Hiro's kick with his forearm. He pushed back and delivered his own powerful punch. Hiro jumped backwards over. He landed next to the wall that was lined with all kinds of cooking knives. He grabbed two of them and threw them like kunai. Guy, thinking fast, grabbed the nearest pair of metal utensils he could, 2 spatulas. He used the small grates that lined the flat end to catch the knives and throw them aside. He took a couple steps forward as Hiro threw a couple more knives. Guy spun the spatulas around expertly, deflecting the knives that Hiro threw as he walked up to him. Just as Hiro threw his last knife, Guy appeared right next to him, dropped the spatulas, picked up a huge pan and s it over top of his sensei's head, completely covering it. Blinded, Hiro wasn't able to do anything as Guy spun around and delivered a powerful kick to the side of the pot, knocking him clear off of his feet and through the nearest wall. Guy immediately leapt through the hole his sensei had created to see that he was now inside of the bathroom, the women's one at that. There, however, was no sign of his sensei. He looked and saw all 6 stall doors were closed. Cautiously, he walked up to the first one and with a mighty shout kicked the door off its hinges and into the wall. He then walked to the next one and did the same. He repeated the process all the way up to the last one, which he now stood cautiously in front of. Just as he raised his foot to kick, he felt someone vanish with extreme speed from the inside. The next thing he heard was the sound of a sink being from the wall. He spun around and brought his arms up just in time. Hiro swung a sink forward and s the sink into his student's body. The marble material shattered off of Guy's body and just as he lowered his guard, Hiro caught him in the chin with a strong left hook. Guy broke through the last stall door and fell so he was sitting on the toilet. Hiro, with a scream of exertion raised his foot high into the air and brought it down. Guy jumped off the toilet just in time. Hiro's foot into it, shattering it completely and sending toilet water everywhere. Guy jumped forward and tackled his sensei through the stall and into the next one. Holding onto the back of his sensei's head, he put his face right into the toilet, flushed it quick, before bringing both fists together and him in the back of the head, shattering the toilet with Hiro's face. Guy slowly dropped to his knees, panting heavily. Toilet water continuously sprayed from both toilets, soaking him and his unmoving sensei that lay face down in the slowly growing puddle. Had enough, Hiro-sensei? Guy asked between gasps of breath. His sensei had yet to move and he was beginning to hope that while he might not be K, maybe it was possible to knock him out. Suddenly, Hiro's hands twitched. Guy noticed it but had no time to react as his sensei's body sprang into action, grabbing him by the face and him through the wall and back out into the streets. Guy fell onto the deserted street on his back but quickly rolled to his feet and took a couple steps back. The green orbs that had been flickering before shined brightly and powerfully. Hiro slowly walked out of the building after him. Flushing your own sensei's head, not youthful at all. He pulled at his damp hair. Guy shrugged. I'm never going to have the opportunity again. Got to take your chances when you get them. I think that happens to be quite a youthful way of life myself. Hiro shook his head. You should be taking this a little more seriously. You know I am immortal yet you engage me in only taijutsu. This time Guy rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. I was really hoping you were capable of being knocked out. It would appear that I am hoping for a little much. This time Hiro just sighed as he rubbed his forehead. I forgot how much of a handful you could be, Guy. I'll take that as a compliment, Hiro-sensei. Guy said as he smiled brightly at the S-man. Hiro stared at him long and hard, no trace of a smile on his face. I see, Guy, you really do miss me, don't you? Guy's bright smile that was on his face faltered a little. I'm sorry, Guy. I know it must have really hurt you when I never came back from that mission, but you can't drag this fight on with me for a selfish reason such as that. You have your own team now that you should be worrying about. Guy's smile vanished completely as he tilted his head down, causing his hair to cover his eyes. I know, I just can't help it. Battling with you like this reminds me of the times we used to spar together. I really missed those days. I had never wanted them to end. But they have ended, Guy. You can still be youthful, but you have to grow up a little too. Hiro said as gently as he could. Yeah, I know. Guy raised his head and again the smile that he had before returned. I was really happy to see you again, Hiro-sensei. From here on out though, this battle is serious. Guy widened his stance and raised his arms up. That's my student. Hiro also returned the smile once again as he too widened his stance. First gate, open. Energy erupted from their B as they both straightened themselves out, blasting the green orbs that hung around them backwards. Guy took one visible step forward and vanished. Hiro stepped to the side just in time to dodge Guy's fist. The shockwave that followed from his extreme speed continued forward and into the building he and Hiro had just been fighting in, collapsing it completely. Hiro brought his leg around in a strong kick but Guy caught it with both hands. Giving a loud shout he spun around and whirled his sensei down the street with all his might. Hiro flew straight on through several buildings before he rolled to a stop, leaving a small chain of holes in the walls that marked his path. Guy cleared his way through the holes in less than a second and again appeared in front of his sensei, his foot raised high in the air. Hiro brought his forearms above his head and blocked the kick. He pushed off so hard that Guy was sent flying into the air. Hiro appeared above him, and punched his student in the stomach with such force that Guy struck the ground and created a 10-meter deep crater. Not bad, sensei. More energy began to burst forward from his body. Second gate, open. They both shouted before vanishing again. They both reappeared on top of a 14-story hotel building, their fists striking into each other with such force that the roof beneath them collapsed and they fell onto a bed in a small room. Guy slightly lost his balance for a half second but it was enough for Hiro to punch him straight through the wall and into the hallway. Guy leaned against the wall of the hallway, panting heavily as Hiro appeared again. Just before he could swing his fist forward, Guy vanished and then drilled his elbow into his sensei's head, knocking him down a floor. He then jumped down after him to see he had widened his stance once again. Guy, still in midair, crossed his arms as well. Third gate, open. The energy that are from there be completely knocked down the walls around them. A moment later and they heard a loud creaking as the 2 stories above them began to collapse. The top floor into the one below that, and then it happened again. In just seconds, Guy and Hiro were falling as the entire 14-floor building caved in on itself. Hiro kicked off of a piece of debris that tumbled all around them and flew right at his student, his fist outstretched. Guy blocked the punch with his forearm, and flew back into a falling bed that he launched off of. He delivered a powerful spinning kick that sent Hiro flying into more debris that he again kicked off of. This continued all the way to the bottom, the 2 of them kicking off of falling objects as they attacked and counterattacked one another. Soon they both landed nimbly on their feet, but the rest of the building came down on top of them, burying them both. Silence settled as all the creaking and crashing stopped as the destroyed building finally came to rest. It only lasted for a couple seconds as all the pieces of debris began shaking wildly. Just a moment later and it was all blown away and sent flying into the air. Fourth gate, open. Guy and Hiro shouted as the glowing figures became visible once again. They both jumped forward and spun in the air. At the end of their spin they kicked at one another, their legs colliding into each other in midair with such force that the very ground beneath them cracked. They both landed nimbly on the cracking street that finally gave way completely. They both landed down in the sewers beneath Konoha. Guy barely touched the water before he jumped forward and delivered a punch so powerful that Hiro was sent flying down the sewer path. Every time he shot past a manhole, the lid was blasted skywards from the wind pressure. Hiro finally managed to skid himself to a stop, creating massive waves as he did. He was now almost completely enshrouded in darkness with some of the only light coming from the open manholes. That didn't matter to a shinobi as trained as he, however. He could hear Guy's movements as he moved with blinding speeds. Hiro bent over backwards and dodged a kick that would have otherwise split him in half and then grabbed onto Guy's leg. He swung him straight into the wall with such force that Guy broke on through it and landed on the sewer path a whole street over. He looked up and he and his sensei stared hard at one another from their opposing sides. They then once again widened their stances. Fifth gate, open. Enma, extend. Hiruzen shouted as he swatted down 4 Otogakure shinobi at once. Mokuton no Jutsu. Another couple were absorbed into the tree by Yamato's wood technique. Disappear. The Kazekage clenched his hands and with a chorus of screams his golden dust crushed a group of Otogakure shinobi. Mushidama. Gen enclosed yet another group of the enemy shinobi inside a sphere of his insects. Gatsuga. Kaiten. Hosenka no Jutsu. Buban Baika no Jutsu. Kiba, Sasuke, and Choji all ganged up on a single Jonin from Otogakure, successfully bringing him down. Tenten, he's in a genjutsu. Sakura shouted as she trapped another Jonin in her illusions. Got it. Tenten flicked her wrist and a kunai buried itself into the man's head. Hayate gave a shout of exertion as he chopped down the last couple around him. He stood panting heavily as he turned and looked over the dwindling battles. There are only a couple of them left, while there are still several hundred of our own. This battle is ours. Hiruzen nodded proudly as he watched what Otogakure shinobi remained begin to drop their weapons and hold their hands up in surrender. He was drenched with sweat himself and he could see the Kazekage looked ready to fall over at any second. Everyone appeared that way. While many of them had survived, if too much more had happened, he doubted they would have had the strength to carry on. Whatever happened to Guy? Asuma asked as he plopped down on the ground and lit up a cigarette. Kakashi, who had just finally gotten some of his movements back, limped up to the smoking shinobi with the help of a broken hunk of wood that acted as a cane. His Sharingan eye was covered back up. He was fighting Seikuhiro, but their battle took him off somewhere. I have sent several of my men that are capable of sealing to assist him. The Kazekage wiped the sweat that was leaking into his eyes away. We should be hearing from him favorably soon. Kazekage-sama. There they are now. The young Kage turned to his men but quickly noticed they looked incredibly panicked. What happened? The shinobi landed in front of their cage, bowed deeply in regret. We went to seal Hiro as requested, but they couldn't have possibly opened several of the gates already. Hiruzen asked in worry. Well, actually, the shinobi sweat profusely as he looked up at both Kage. We couldn't tell which one was which. They both looked the same. Everyone present practically fell over. Are you freaking kidding me? The Kazekage bellowed at the top of his lungs. You call yourself Sunagakure Shinobi. He had never felt so ashamed his whole life. Was sorry, sir. It was truly confusing. Before they could mumble any more words of apology, the ground beneath everyone began shaking violently. What's going on? Kurenai asked as she tried her best to stand upright. She didn't have to wait long to get her answer. Guy and Hiro burst out of the ground, right in the middle of all of the Konoha and Suna shinobi. Well, I'll be damned, even I can't tell the difference. The Kazekage. They both landed several feet away from the hole they had made when they came out and slowly observed the area around them. Guy smiled brightly at what he saw. It would appear the battle is over. You're all that's left, Hiro-sensei. The Hokage turned his head slightly and nodded at the ceiling group that had just returned. That answer your question. He then turned back and yelled loudly. Everyone give your aid to Might Guy. Defeat the last enemy that stands between us and victory. That kind of hurts, being referred to as the enemy, even if it's true. Hiro gave a sad smile as all the shinobi in the vicinity began to charge at him. He spread his stance. Everyone, get away from him. Guy shouted too late as a couple dozen shinobi from both villages closed in on Hiro. Sixth gate, open. They were all blasted completely away from the force of energy that Hiro emitted. Normally it would have been no problem for the shinobi to recover from the impact, however, in their exhausted state, none of them were even able to land properly and they all collapsed to the ground in a heap. Most of them didn't get back up. Damn, sixth gate, open. Guy shouted as he too powered up. Hiro jumped high into the air as the shinobi continued to try to swarm in on him. A dozen cloth wrappings and puppets intent on sealing him followed after him. Asa Kujaku. He began pumping his fists rapidly and whole barrage of fireballs began to rain down on all of the present shinobi, also burning apart anything that could have sealed him. Asa Kujaku. Guy shouted as he fired his own series of fireballs skywards. The balls of fire collided in the air, yet some continued to make their way through and bombard the shinobi on the ground. I've had enough. The Kazekage waved his fingers and a giant wave of golden dust rose to attack Hiro. Hiro, still in midair, turned towards the giant wave of sand. He launched even more fireballs that battered the golden dust, morphing it together and making it harder for the Kazekage to control. Impossible, the Kazekage couldn't believe what he had just seen. Hiro, as he began to fall back towards the ground, raised his arms up. Guy had no choice but to do the same in hopes of being able to keep up. Seventh gate, open. They both shouted as more energy burst forward from their green sweat began to leak out of every pore in their body as they slowly pushed themselves to the limit. This is not going to be pretty. Yamato watched in horror as the green energy began to take the shape of two tigers. Everyone needs to take cover. Enma. Hiruzen shouted. I'm already on it. Enma formed himself into a cage around both Kage, Hayate, Yamato, Asuma, and Kakashi. Harudora. Both men shouted as they swung their fists at one another. The giant tiger heads appeared to roar as they moved forward, slowly getting smaller as they continued on. Just as they compacted to the size of fists, they ran into each other and exploded. The resulting gust was so immensely powerful that everyone was blown away and all the buildings for at least 20 surrounding blocks were knocked completely over. What the hell is going on? Tenten yelled as she, Sasuke, Kiba, Sakura, and Choji were all sent flying from the torrent of wind along with everyone else. No one was capable of responding to her. The giant tree bent and the leaves rustled loudly, but somehow it managed to stay standing throughout the terrible blast. Finally, everything settled down. However, Hiruzen didn't like what he saw. Only Guy, Hiro, and the ones that Enma had protected were left standing. Everyone else had been blown away and likely incapacitated by the strong clashing jutsu. To think we would be reduced down to this, the Kazekage couldn't believe it. What had once been a full-scale war had turned into this. Just 7 people versus 1 enemy. Hiro-sensei, don't do this. We have to stop here. Guy pleaded desperately. I'm sorry, Guy. Hiro shifted his stance for the last time. 8th gate, open. The green sweat that had been leaking off his body turned red as his body reached its limit and he opened the final gate. Guy took a small step back from the incredible energy that surged from the man in front of him. Hiro-sensei. He didn't even see his sensei move, but he felt his fist when it s into his stomach and sent him bouncing painfully across the now completely flat battlefield. I've had enough. The Kazekage sent another barrage of golden dust at his opponent. Hiro shifted his stance and pulled his arm backwards. With a mighty shout he punched at the golden dust and batted it away and right back at the Kazekage. He could only raise his arms in defense as he was defeated by his own jutsu. Mokuton no jutsu. Yamato shouted as he his hands on the ground. The wood from the tree shot forward and stretched out towards Hiro. As it got close to him, the wood suddenly caught fire and Yamato was forced to pull it back or risk setting the whole tree ablaze. Hiro raised his foot high into the air and it down. The earth beneath him and all the way to Yamato crumbled. The man could do nothing as he was battered and bruised by the twisting earth. When it finally stopped, he didn't get back up. Take this. Hayate and Asuma each appeared from the side, the samurai with his sword, and Asuma with his chakra knives. Neither of them stood a chance as Hiro's fists into their faces, knocking them out well before they went flying backwards. Damn, this is getting out of hand. Kakashi dropped the piece of wood he had been leaning on and began to form a set of seals. You fool. You'll be if you use any more jutsu. Sarutobi's Enma into Kakashi's gut, knocking the wind from his body and doubling him over. He then turned back towards Hiro. Enma, extend. He pointed the staff straight at Hiro as it shot forward. It into the man's sea but halted completely and couldn't extend any further. He halted my extension. Enma gasped in surprise. Hokage-sama, Hiro acknowledged as he stared at the old man. It's great to see you still alive. Please forgive me for what I am about to do. You can't possibly be planning to use that move. Hiruzen had thought maybe he had gotten out of himself using Shiki Fujin when Orochimaru had been defeated. It now looked like he might have to use it after all. That's what he thought until he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned in surprise to see Guy standing there. Hokage-sama, this is my battle, please don't trouble yourself with this. Guy stumbled forward and passed his leader. Guy, Sarutobi shook himself of his shock. Don't. He yelled too late. 8 gate, open. The green sweat around Guy also turned red as he too opened the final gate. I see, it turns this way because it literally is your mixing in with your sweat. What an awful technique. Every part of Guy's body screamed in pain as he and his sensei locked eyes. Guy, I never wanted you to have to share my fate. What a tragedy. Hiro shook his head sadly. It's all right, Hiro-sensei. If it is for this village, for my team, I will gladly give my life. Guy settled himself into a stance he had never used before. He wasn't sure how, but he knew it. Hiro slowly settled into the stance as well. The ultimate technique of the gates, Yororyu. Let's do it, Guy said solemnly. The red sweat around them began swirling violently. A moment later and both men were set ablaze by a fire so bright, Sarutobi had to avert his eyes. Yororyu, they shouted as the fire around them took the shape of dragon heads. The 2 dragon heads launched straight at each other. Sarutobi watched through the gaps in his fingers as the 2 dragons ran into each other and then bent straight up at a 90-degree angle. He could do nothing but stare in awe as the sky changed to look like the sun was setting as the 2 flaming dragons formed a spiral as they circled around and attacked one another while flying straight upwards. Finally, after raising hundreds of feet into the air, both dragons let out a bestial roar, collided once more in an explosion that lit up the sky for thousands of miles, and then flickered out completely. The sky slowly began to return to normal and Hiruzen squinted his eyes at the sky, trying to catch a glimpse of either man. Sarutobi. There. Enma's arm materialized out of the staff and pointed in the sky. Just moments later and the Hokage spotted the smoking bee of both men as they fell towards the ground. Guy. Sarutobi shouted as he ran forward. Enma transformed completely back to normal and ran forward with him. Guy. Sarutobi turned to see Kakashi was behind him and running forward too. Despite his heavy injuries and having been doubled over, he was back on his feet and running with a heavy limp towards his eternal rival. The old man and the monkey managed to get below Guy just seconds before he hit the ground. They stretched their arms out and caught him together. Hiro hit the ground with full force, leaving a small crater. How cruel, Hiro mumbled as he slowly began to stumble his way out. Sarutobi turned to him. While he was still weak, he was going to seal him. However, to his surprise he saw Hiro was already crumbling apart. It would appear that not even an immortal body can take the strain of using that move. Guy's chuckling caused everyone to turn to him in surprise. Kakashi had just arrived on scene too. That sure was youthful, huh? Youthful, more like it stole all your youth from you. Hiro sighed as most of his body had all but deteriorated. Guy, I'm proud of you. You are a real hero. Thank you, it was great to see you again, Hiro-sensei. Guy and his sensei shared one last smile before Hiro crumbled away completely. Guy gave a ragged cough. His skin was blackened from burns and most of his spandex was all but burnt off. Guess this is really it. Guy. Kakashi bent down and took the man's hand in his. If there's anything you want, just let me know. Guy attempted to chuckle but instead gave another terrible cough. I just really wish I could talk to my team one last time. I might be able to help. Everyone turned in surprise to see a dazed and teary-looking Ino. I was unconscious and away from the blast zone until the last attack. I watched those dragons rise into the sky and came to check it out when I saw Hokage-sama. You're saying you can connect me to my students? Guy asked hopefully. Ino twirled her hair, a troubled look on her face. I should be able to. I'm not especially close to them, but as long as they don't reject my mind link, I should be able to connect our thoughts. What do I have to do? Guy coughed as he tried to sit himself up. Just hold my hand, I'll take care of the rest. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto shouted as he created another group of clones. Kabuto had just destroyed his last group and was now holding off Lee and Hinata's combined taijutsu with extreme ease. Come on guys, let's go. Naruto's clones gave a shout of agreement as they charged forward with the original. Kabuto chuckled as he flipped backwards and away from Hinata and Lee's attacks. His hands were glowing a bright blue, showing his chakra scalpel technique was in use. This isn't even a fight. 3 completely exhausted genin think they can defeat me. We will show you. Lee yelled just as Naruto and his clones ran past him and Hinata. He joined them and charged forward. He wasn't going to be the one to admit it, but Kabuto was right about one thing. They were all completely exhausted. Lee himself had opened the first gate 3 times within a 2-hour period and had opened another 5 on top of that once. He doubted he had the strength left to open them again. Naruto, for what it was worth, seemed to have most of his physical energy back, but was lacking greatly on chakra, and it was clear that he was afraid of using too much of it for fear of tapping into the cubies. The simplest push could possibly be enough to break the temporary fix he had accomplished on the seal. Hinata's condition wasn't much better. While her fight with Neji hadn't seemed to bother her too much at the time, the effects of taking all those Uroken strikes were really starting to show now as the battle continued on. She barely had any chakra reserves left and she had run out of arrows to fire entirely in her last battle, so she couldn't fall back and rely on that either. All in all, they were in a bad situation. Naruto, Hinata, Lee, they all immediately skidded to a halt, splashing water everywhere as they heard a voice inside their minds. Kabuto raised his eyebrows curiously at the sudden halt. Ino, Naruto asked aloud. Am I going crazy? No, it really is me. I'm talking into your minds. Lee and Hinata shared a concerned look. Ino sounded incredibly panicked. Ino-san, what's wrong? Hinata wasn't sure if it helped, but she shouted her sentence out loud like Naruto had done. Kabuto finally seemed to understand what was going on, but instead of doing anything, he relaxed his stance. He was going to see this play out. Guy-sensei, your sensei he's going to talk to you guys, himself. Even Naruto had a bad feeling welling up in his stomach. Lee, Naruto, Hinata. Guy's voice reached their heads, but they all immediately sensed something was off. His voice sounded incredibly quiet. Before they could say anything, they heard their sensei giving a terribly ragged cough. I don't have much time left, so I'm going to have to make this quick. Naruto finally snapped out of his shock. You don't have much time left. What do you mean? Is Ino going to lose connection? No, I'm sorry team, I'm S. They all gasped at once. Hinata raised his hands to her mouth. Lee took a step forward and stared up at the sky. His face showed clear denial of the idea. Naruto's mouth simply hung open. This is a trick to motivate us, right? Lee screamed into the air. I would never play such an unyouthful trick on my students, you should all know that. Guy's voice sounded as serious, and Lee realized now that he was telling the truth. Naruto, however, wasn't convinced. That's not possible. He too looked up at the sky as he yelled. How could you have been defeated? You're Guy-sensei, the most youthful jonin alive. Things took a terrible turn for the worse out here. Guy broke into another terrible fit of coughing. This time it sounded like he hacked up some bee. I was forced to open the 8th gate. Now my time is at an end. Why? Hinata asked as she began feverishly wiping at her eyes, trying to stop the tears. Why did this all have to happen? Young Ino here is connecting me to you so I can pass on my final words, as your sensei. I couldn't leave you without saying goodbye. Guy's voice got more and more labored as he had to pause between his words to gasp for breath. Don't go at all, Guy-sensei. It isn't fair. Naruto stomped the ground as he too fought off tears. Naruto, that spirit to never give up is your greatest strength. Even in the darkest of situations, I know it will enable you to find a way out. You've always had the spirit, crafty fox after all. Hinata, the confidence of you have built in yourself can be either your most powerful asset, or your biggest weakness. Always remain humble and you will not steer down the wrong path. I know you can do it, my strong lioness. Lee, you are the oldest of the group and I'm leaving it to you to guide your teammates and steer them on the proper path. You have inherited the strength of youth, the strength of a fearless tiger. Guy-sensei, all 3 of his students let their tears fall openly as he finished speaking to each of them individually. If the 3 of you remember nothing else that I have taught you, I ask you that you remember this. You've made me proud as a sensei and I would trade the whole world for you 3. I love you. Goodbye, my students. Guy-sensei. All 3 of them shouted as they felt the connection between their minds separate. Hinata crashed to the ground on her knees and held her eyes as she cried into her hands. The original Naruto walked up to her and slowly stroked the top of her head, his tears dripping into the water as he did. Lee stood completely rigid, his body shaking every now and then as he did his best to hold his in. Kabuto chuckled lightly as he slowly took a couple steps towards them. Bad news from the outside? He asked mockingly. A second later though and Kabuto's smirk fell off his face as 3 incredible blasts of chakra reached him at once. He took a slight step back and raised a hand to slightly shield his face. Naruto was surging forth with red energy while Hinata with blue and Lee with clear as they each released incredible power. You bastard! Hinata, slowly, robotically got up to her feet. Her hair danced wildly from the chakra that danced in brilliant blue flames that whipped wildly around her. We're going to tear you to shreds. Naruto's eyes glowed deep red and it was clear that other than giving into his rage, the Kyuubi wasn't in control of his body at all. Lee appeared to have opened 3 of the gates automatically as the water around him swirled magnificently. I hope you are ready to answer for all of your wrongs. They all began to move as one. Kabuto. Ino, thank you. Guy whispered as his hand grew heavy and his grip around Ino's hand loosened. Why yeah? Ino let his hand fall to the ground and quickly turned away, attempting to mask her own tears. Guy's last words to his student had even touched her. She was surprised to see her father standing sadly behind her. Dad, she wailed as she threw herself onto him. Inoki wrapped his arms around his daughter as she cried into his sea. Kakashi bowed his head in shame. He didn't even pay attention to the fact that all the shinobi that had been previously blasted away were slowly making their way back. Soon there was a crowd of a couple hundred shinobi all gathered in a massive circle around the corpse of Might Guy. Guy, it shouldn't have been this way. Hiruzen whispered as he touched the man's hand. You should have left the job to himself to this foolish old man. Guy-sensei. Tenten shouted as she ran forward and dropped to her knees next to his lifeless body. Guy-sensei. She shouted as she began to shake his body, tears flowing opening already from her eyes. Kakashi slowly opened his mouth to say his own parting words but he then finally seemed to notice something. The green orbs that had previously been blown away had returned to the area. What's more, there was easily 3 times as many of them as before and they seemed to be hanging over Guy's body. Slowly, the orbs began to swirl lightly around Guy's sea. Faster and faster they began to spin and Kakashi turned his one eye away to look behind him. At first he couldn't see because of the massive group of shinobi present but when he got to his feet he could see green orbs flying in from all over the village. They all joined the swirling torrent of orbs that was beginning to look more and more like a tornado that drilled into Guy's sea. Guy's body began to glow a green as bright as the orbs of the tornado appeared to be sinking into his body. Everyone watched breathlessly as Guy's clothes slowly repaired themselves, his orange leguamas that had been no more completely reconstructed, the holes in his spandex patched up and his chunin vest repaired itself. What's more, his once blackened skin began to return to his normal complexion. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the last of the green orbs disappeared into Guy's sea and the green aura that surrounded him dissipated. Then, miraculously, Guy's sea began rising and falling as his breathing returned. He's alive, Kakashi whispered. A loud mumble broke out amongst the rest of the shinobi as they passed out what Kakashi had just said. Guy's eyes fluttered open slowly and he groaned loudly. I didn't imagine the afterworld being such a bright place. He hefted himself up to a sitting position, holding onto his head like he had a bad headache as he did. He finally took in his surroundings. When he did, he jumped to his feet in one fluid motion, knocking Tenten aside and onto her butt as he did. Don't tell me you all S2. He looked completely panicked. Guy, you're alive, Hiruzen said as he got up to his feet. Come again? Guy asked as he took in the surroundings. It definitely looked like Konoha to him. How? The Shodai, his protection jutsu revived you as its final act. Yamato said proudly as he pushed his way through the crowd. So, I'm really alive? He asked in disbelief. Guy-sensei, you're definitely alive. There's no way you could be taken out. Tenten said with a bright smile as she stood up. The first man to ever survive opening all 8 of the celestial gates. The Kazekage clarified as a small path opened up, revealing his badly beaten form. Not a battler. Kakashi chuckled as he leaned an arm on Guy's shoulder. Pretty fitting for my eternal rival. Your name is bound to become a legend in history with a name like that. But, I gave such an epic death monologue. What are my students going to think when they suddenly see me alive? Guy shouted, suddenly in a panic. Where is Ino? I need to tell them right away. Kakashi pulled him back before he could run off and Guy stared at him in amazement. His one eye smiled craftily at the just resurrected man. Maybe we should hold off on that. Kabuto was dumbfounded. Just a second ago and he had had this fight in the bag. Now he was barely dodging attacks from the 3 genin that were giving him no room to counter whatsoever. Double leaf hurricane. Naruto appeared spinning from the front and Lee from the back, their legs coming around in a kick. Kawarimi no jutsu. Kabuto substituted himself with a piece of the splintered cross. Had he been a second slowly and he was positive he would have lost his head as Lee and Naruto's legs into each other in midair. Take this, Hinata shouted as she fired off 3 arrows from her bow at once. I thought she was out of arrows, Kabuto didn't understand. It all made sense a second later as the arrows transformed into Naruto's that were flying at him at high speeds. Kabuto ducked and rolled out of the way, barely dodging the clones as they flew past him. You're not going anywhere. Suten, Mizurapa no Jutsu. Naruto inhaled and breathed out a powerful jet stream of water that into the back of a charging Lee. It propelled Lee forward with such velocity that Kabuto had no choice but to raise his forearms in front of himself to block that strike. The force of the blow he could tell shattered both of his bones and he was sent flying straight across the arena. Not good. Kabuto's bones instantly mended themselves and he landed on the water on his feet, skidding slowly to a stop. To his surprise, Hinata was already just a couple feet away, having predicted where he would land. Kabuto stepped back lightly and deflected her first couple Uroken strikes. He then stepped to the side and brought his hand up, ready to see her down with his chakra scalpel. Before he could, he felt a blade of wind pierce him straight through the arm. He gave a shout of pain and stepped backwards, but Hinata took the chance to spear him in the stomach with her enhanced palm. Kabuto spit B and doubled backwards. Hinata pressed forward while Naruto continued to give her ranged support. Naruto Typhoon no Jutsu. Naruto shouted as he combined his wind blades with a water jutsu, launching a drill made of both right at the 2 battling opponents. Kabuto crouched lightly down and ducked under Hinata's next Uroken swipe, but before he could swing his leg forward in a sweep that would have tripped her and knocked her into Naruto's jutsu, he felt Lee's arm wrappings bind his leg. What? He spun to see Lee standing just off to the side. When he turned back, Hinata was no longer in sight and the jutsu was on him. Kawarimi no Jutsu. Once again, Kabuto barely got out of the way by using the substitution technique. What insane teamwork. They're working so well together that I can't even find an opening at all. Hakusho Kaiten, attack mode. Lee and Hinata shouted together as the spinning defense-turned drill flew straight at Kabuto. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto shouted as he created 4 clones right above Kabuto that immediately latched onto the man's limbs, restricting his movements. Get off of me. Kabuto attempted to pull himself free but it was too late. The spinning drill S into his stomach, knocking him clear off of his feet and sending him flying into the wall of his own barrier. He began to shake violently as the black wall shocked him heavily with strong currents of electricity. After a few moments, he finally pulled free and tumbled head over heels towards the ground. He hit the water with a loud splash. Did that get him? Lee asked as he and Hinata separated. The original Naruto landed right next to them, ready to create more clones. To their disbelief, Kabuto slowly picked himself up from the water. His glasses had been shattered and had fallen off of his face and his clothes had a huge hole, revealing his perfectly unharmed stomach. Impossible. That technique should have torn his insides apart. Lee couldn't believe what he was seeing. Kabuto began chuckling quietly and the chuckle soon grew louder and louder. In just a matter of moments it was full-blown laughter. My body is invincible. Any damage you do I can just regenerate right through. You have no chance of beating me. He reached into his back pouch and pulled out a syringe needle. Now I'll show you true hopelessness. He put the needle into his arm and injected the contents into himself. That can't be good. Naruto was forced to take a step back as purple energy erupted from Kabuto's body in violent waves. All the power of a curse seal without gaining a permanent mark or suffering the dangerous side effects it poses to the body. Kabuto said while laughing. It's only a temporary boost of power but I think you 3 will find it will be more than enough for me to be able to match up to 3 little genin. A moment later and he vanished from all of their sights. He's fast. Naruto said in surprise not even a second before the bottom of Kabuto's foot S into the back of his head, sending him flying across the arena. Kabuto was now in between both Hinata and Lee. Quote, I won't let you 2 get away. The only one I need alive is Naruto. Kabuto yelled as he turned and chased after Hinata. Kaiten. Hinata shouted as she activated her spinning shield. Kabuto's hand bounced backwards as he struck at it. Leave her alone. 4 Narutos shouted as they all descended on him. You just don't know when to give up, do you? Kabuto dodged the first one as it punched at him and kneed him hard in the stomach. It flew backwards and S into a second one. The remaining 2 pulled out the chakra knives and swung them forward. Kabuto effortlessly caught the clone's hands. He then twirled around and effortlessly threw them both halfway across the arena. Yuruken. Hinata was already within Kabuto's guard, her open palm swinging forward. That won't touch me. Kabuto vanished and reappeared instantly behind her, his hand raised in the air, ready to chop down. Konoha Kaigansho. Lee shouted as his elbow S into Kabuto's forearm, halting his attack. How nice of you to both stick right close to me. So you switched out already. Clever move, Naruto-kun. He turned to see Naruto, Lee, and Hinata all standing side by side, gasping for breath. I can't keep this up. Naruto was holding his side. He looked ready to tip over. Lee looked even worse. I'm starting to reach my limit too, Hinata mumbled regretfully. This last move is going to have to be the winning one. You do not mean we should use that move, do you? We have never successfully pulled it off. Lee turned to her with wide eyes. Naruto cracked his knuckles and licked his lips. No time like the present. Besides, failure isn't an option this time. Not after what this bastard did to Guy-sensei. Lee finally nodded. Alright, let's do it. As if I'd let you. Kabuto took a couple steps forward but then the last person in the arena stepped in between him and the 3 of them. You. How can you move? Neji. They all asked in surprise. The Hyuga genius turned his head towards them, his Byakugan was activated. It was like you said, Lee, I couldn't break free of the body control because I lacked the will to truly try. He turned back towards Kabuto. I don't know if I'm ready to throw away my belief in fate, but I do know this, if it is fate that this village be destroyed after a great man like Guy-sensei gave his life to save it, then I will fight that fate with everything I got. Neji, Lee smiled happily at his old teammate. Hold him just long enough for us to complete our jutsu. We'll finish the job. Got it. Neji charged forward before Lee had even finished talking. Who the hell do you think you are messing with? Kabuto roared as he met Neji's charge head on. I am the man that is going to control this whole world. We'll see about that. Fate or not, we will stop you. Neji swung his palm forward and Kabuto batted it to the side. He then stepped in and attacked at Neji's organs with his chakra scalpel. Ducking back, Neji just barely dodged the attack and then struck at Kabuto's outstretched arm with his index finger. Kabuto let out a small hiss of pain as he swung his leg forward. He caught Neji in the ribs with his foot, knocking the Hyuga genius to the side and out of the way. He turned back to the three genin of Guy's team and was curious at what he saw. Hinata's hands were encased in blue chakra in the shape of lion heads. Naruto's were encased in red chakra in the shape of fox heads. Juho Soshiken, Juho Kitsuneken. They each yelled their technique name respectively. They then turned to Lee, who was sweating profusely. I can do this. His hands were shaking violently. Finally, after just another couple moments of strain, green sweat broke forward from only his hands. Yes, seventh gate, partial opening. Lee stood up next to his teammates. The green sweat around his hands changed shape and took the form of two tiger heads. Juho Toriken, a partial open. Kabuto asked in surprise as he began to run forward. What good comes of fighting me? You're only making your deaths that much more painful. We'll see about that. Naruto yelled before he nodded to each of his teammates. Let's go. They all charged forward. Kabuto skid to a halt and the purple energy that had been swirling around him flared up violently. Fine then, have it your way. He brought his arm back and the energy around his fist began to spin magnificently for just a moment before it seemed to trip and tinker. What? Kabuto asked in surprise as he looked at his arm. It was then he realized what had happened. No way. He looked to Neji to see him smirking victoriously. He had seen the tenketsu point in his arm, meaning he couldn't properly channel the chakra for his attack. Which also meant he couldn't counter theirs. Take this. All three of them shouted together as they each swung a fist forward. The red fox, blue lion, and green tiger all swirled together into one focal point as they did. Juho Renden. Is everyone prepared? Sarutobi shouted as he observed all of his and the Kazekige's shinobi. They all now stood outside of the still fully erected barrier, prepared for the next possible battle. Hiyashi and everyone else had already been treated and the barrier squad was again hard at work trying to take it down. Yes, sir, everyone shouted, albeit nervously. They were all aware that at any moment, the Kyuubi no Yoko could break through and attack them all. No matter what comes through, when that barrier opens, be prepared, Sarutobi shouted to all his men. He then turned to the Kazekige that stood on his left. Regardless of the outcome, I am thankful for your help. The young Kage shrugged his shoulders. I am sure things will work out. Might Guy seems to think so. At the mention of the still living man, Sarutobi turned back towards him. He stood just behind the barrier squad. Guy was going to be the first one through the barrier, no matter what. Calm down, Guy. Kakashi patted his eternal rival on the shoulder. The youthful man was trembling in anxiety. They'll make it out of there, just believe in them. I believe in them. Guy responded immediately. They've just been in there for a long time. No one should be able to fight for that long. Kabuto really is one tenacious bastard. I should have just killed him when he met him in the forest. This is no time to be thinking about what you should have done. You just need to focus on what to do next. Kakashi finally pulled his hand off Guy's shoulder as he turned back towards the barrier. Suddenly, the sound of cracking from about 20 feet off the ground caused everyone to turn and gave it a spot about that high on the black barrier. What they saw surprised them. The black wall appeared to be cracking apart from that point. Was that you? Guy asked hopefully as he looked down at the barrier squad. They all shook their heads and just as he looked back up, the barrier gave way completely. No one expected to see a giant spinning beam made of blue, red, and green energy that continued to fly at a steady angle into the air. After traveling for a full minute, the spiraling beam finally tinkered out of existence. Just as it did, the black barrier collapsed the rest of the way and all the pieces seemed to disappear. Guy immediately charged into the arena through the gap that Lee and Naruto had created during their fight. What he saw caused him to fall to his knees immediately in relief. Naruto, Hinata and Lee were all safe. They stood panting over Kabuto's kneeling form. Said white-haired man had a giant hole in his stomach. Why, isn't my regeneration working? Kabuto had a waterfall of bee pouring from his lips. Easy, You just got hit by not only Hinata's strongest Urukan strike but a big dose of Kyuubi's chakra too. Naruto answered between gasps of breath. Combined with Lee Senpai's fist as well, it is no wonder your chakra network has shut down completely. Hinata leaned heavily against her boyfriend. This battle is ours, Kabuto. You failed to extract the fox and you failed to destroy the leaf. Lee's hands looked like they had been stuck through a grinder, but he didn't look even slightly bothered by it. I see, Kabuto mumbled as his body slowly began to fall forward. My experiment was a failure. He fell face first into the ankle-deep water and never moved again. We did it. Naruto tried to smile, but the attempt only came out bitter. We avenged Guy-sensei. The sound of someone clearing their tea caused them all to look up. Their sensei stood smiling at them all proudly. Actually, it turns out I won't be leaving quite just yet. I still got some youth in me, after all. Gee, Guy-sensei, they all whispered in disbelief. I know you three must be mad, thinking I lied, but believe me, I really thought I was going to s. Guy rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. Actually, this kind of reminds me of when we thought Naruto had been right. Guy-sensei. All three of them tackled Guy at once, knocking the big man over and onto his butt. You're alive. They didn't sound at all angry about being deceived as they clung to their sensei with bone-crushing hugs. Hey, come on, you three. Guy felt tears beginning to pool under his eyes. If you are this emotional, you might make me cry too. Tears immediately sprang from his eyes after finishing that sentence. He returned the hug to his students, stood high in the air and swung the three of them around. I thought I was never going to see you again. Every shinobi watched with an amused smile on their face as they witnessed the joyous reunion between the sensei and his students. Every single one of them was exhausted, covered in scratches and bruises and close to running out of chakra. Hundreds of their men had been killed and countless buildings and streets had been destroyed beyond repair. Yet to all these smiling, laughing, and even crying shinobi, none of that was on their mind. There was only one thing they all knew at that moment. They had won. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.